Syrian army fights to hold off a militant offensive in western Aleppo as heavy fighting and a potential rebel takeover forces locals to flee the area. Also this hour, Russia's defence ministry releases a video from Moscow's largest aircraft carrier in action after its latest journey across the Mediterranean stirred panic and condemnation in the media. And the Saudi Ambassador to the US says the bombing of Yemen will continue no matter what, as Riyadh assigns a military lawyer whose reputation has been called into question to investigate possible human rights violations by its coalition in Yemen. Hello, welcome. It's just gone midday here in Moscow. You're watching RT International. Now, Russia has announced it will set up another 10-hour humanitarian pause in the Syrian city of Aleppo, starting on Friday morning. The city is witnessing some of its fiercest battles since the conflict there began over 4 years ago, after militants used the previous humanitarian pause to launch a deadly and yet unsuccessful offensive. That's been ongoing for a week, and it's forced the Syrian army into a response. Well, this is footage from the outskirts of western Aleppo, where militant groups have attempted to seize control. The heavy fighting there and a potential rebel takeover is forcing civilians to flee their homes. RT's Murad Gazdiev spoke to some of them.
The rebel offensive against Aleppo has been merciless. Suicide bombers on foot and in vehicles packed with explosives hammered at the city's defenses, leaving wide holes for hundreds of Islamists to charge into. But that was just a drizzle compared to this week's rainstorm of destruction. And all the while, rebel artillery poured rockets, shells and terror all over the city.
Rockets and bombs are falling all around. The house over there was hit by Grad rockets that the terrorists were supplied with. There is no safe place to go in Aleppo.
We're going to a safer place in the same district. We will not leave Aleppo whatever happens. We are proud to stay here in our motherland because we have one life and one God.
These people are no strangers to the Aleppo lottery. They know a shell can land anywhere at any time. It's been like that for years. Most of them are fleeing further into the city to stay with their relatives or in hotels.
What can we do? Where can we go? The start of winter has made the situation worse. We have no clothes, no blankets, and we have absolutely nowhere to go. We can do nothing.
There's no telling when and if any of them will be able to come back, or if they'll have anything to come back to.
I returned to pick up clothes for my children. We put them in the same bed so that they could keep warm. That's the only thing we can do. May God punish the terrorists.
Russia has criticized the wanton and aimless bombardment of Aleppo by rebels. The United States, however, has stayed silent on this shelling, which is surprising given that Washington had previously condemned any action that caused civilians to flee.
And I've seen, reports that they're allowed to leave. They shouldn't have to leave. And they shouldn't be being bombed by their own government and by the Russian military. And that's what needs to stop.
It's just politics. The United States is shaking, shifting, and tilting its moral compass to protect its favored side. The real danger here is that this blank check is pushing the rebels to greater and greater excesses. And that is why these people are running.
Murad Gazdiev there. Well, the voices of those civilians are not often heard in the mainstream media. RT's Miguel Francis Santiago now looks at the twists and turns of the Western media's narrative.
Imagine, if you're mainstream media, how will you report on an ongoing conflict in the Middle East? Now, there's a simple MSM algorithm. You're given a few questions to which you can only answer yes or no. That moves you further down the level. It's really an easy game. The first question is, are there terrorists inside the city? If no, then you're done, nothing to report on. But if the answer is yes, then you move on down to the next question. Are there civilians suffering inside the city? If no, then you don't have a story again. But if the answer is yes, then you're given the next question. Did the government of that particular country ask you for help? If the answer is yes, then the next question, is it Aleppo? And if you answer yes to that one, then this is how you report on it.
It started with this unprecedented bombing that we saw this campaign, a few days of really intense bombardment of eastern Aleppo where hundreds of people were killed.
But again and again, bombs are killing and wounding civilians, including children.
Especially in Aleppo. 250,000 people are trapped in that city.
As the discussions go on at the UN, Syrian regime airstrikes continue to kill civilians in Aleppo.
Tested and approved. Now, if it's not Aleppo, then it has to be Mosul. And unlike Aleppo, over 60 nations were invited there. So this is how you report on that.
The battle has begun to retake Mosul from so-called Islamic State. Iraqi forces alongside Kurdish fighters are leading the push to expel thousands of extremists.
Iraqi and Kurdish troops are not being distracted and they're preparing for their next major push.
U.S. air support with that boost in confidence, and as they moved forward and got closer to Mosul, they told us that not only did they feel, yes, more confident in their own capabilities, but that they also saw ISIS to a certain degree beginning to change its tactics.
In the American-supported campaign to take back the city of Mosul from ISIS, President Obama said today what troops on the front lines have already discovered, it is going to be a difficult fight.
Oh, wait, let's rewind. We forgot to see what happens if the answer to this question is no. Then the only answer is Raqqa. No one's been invited there, not a single nation. Despite that, the U.S. decided that, well, since we're liberating Mosul in Iraq, we might as well liberate Raqqa in Syria.
I certainly am encouraged by the results of our campaign so far. We, as members of the coalition, resolved to follow through with that same sense of urgency and focus on enveloping and collapsing ISIL's control over Raqqa as well. In fact, we've already begun laying the groundwork with our partners to commence the isolation of Raqqa. As we meet here, we're helping to generate the local forces that will do so.
Now, if you don't know yet how to report on Raqqa, just stick to the Mosul script. I'm Miguel Francis Santiago.